Hey guys, Jim here with another video for you. This is the next in my series of 50 years on film. This is 1984. But before we begin, as usual, if you like this content, if you like this video, if you like this series, please give me a thumbs up and a possible subscribe. And most importantly, please leave comments. Positive, negative, neutral, they're always appreciated and always welcome. Now, I want to give a little more information on this series from this point on because there seems to be a little bit of confusion. First of all, as I state in just about every introduction, these are not all of the video or all of the movies from that particular year. These are simply the movies that I own from that year on Blu-ray. I do own many other movies from this year on DVD, but they will not be included on this video. Other movies will be missing from this point on for the next 10 years or so, and there's going to be some glaring omissions, including from this year. You will not see Ghostbusters, The Karate Kid, or a couple other big movies from this year, mainly because I worked in a theater for 10 years. I've seen those movies so many times that even though I love them, especially Ghostbusters, I have no desire ever to watch them again. Therefore, I've never bought them on either DVD or Blu-ray. So hopefully that doesn't bother anybody, and we're just going to push through this like we always do. 1984 had some great movies, but it also had a seismic shift in movie-going experience from that point on, and we'll get to that about halfway through this video. We're going to start off like we always do with comedies. The first one of the greatest comedies of all time in my opinion. This is Spinal Tap. Directed by Rob Reiner. And this movie's a masterpiece. It's incredible. It's been quoted so many times. It's still quoted. I love every moment of this movie. I always have. I remember the confusion when this movie first came out. People actually thought that Spinal Tap was a real band, even though this guy right here, Michael McKean, used to be on Laverne and Shirley. But Spinal Tap is a masterpiece. They're doing a sequel, I guess, this year, which I don't really know how I feel about that, but fingers crossed it'll be just as good as the original. Next, Top Secret. This was Val Kilmer's movie debut, and he absolutely kills it. I remember seeing this the first time thinking, I don't know who this guy is. He's going to be a star. And I was right. It's written and directed by the Zaz team who created Airplane and The Naked Gun. This is my favorite movie as far as their spoof movies go. The only movie of theirs that I do prefer to this is Ruthless People. Unfortunately, that's not available on Blu-ray. Next, you're getting 2 for 1 because I'm not breaking out the discs. This is the Guys Being Guys Party Pack. We're talking about Bachelor Party starring Tom Hanks and Revenge of the Nerds. As you can see, this pack also includes Porky's that came out a couple of years ago. Bachelor Party, I think, is still one of the funniest movies ever. I love that movie. It's so stupid, but it is hilarious. Revenge of the Nerds, I still really like, even though it has not aged well, especially in this day and age. But I'll always have an affection for both of those movies, especially Bachelor Party. And the next comedy on the list, this was on my 10 bad movies that I love, Hot Dog the movie. It is definitely a sex comedy. It is not good, but I will always love this movie. And it does feature some incredible ski sequences. That's Hot Dog. And the last supposedly comedy on this list from the Oh God collection, the third installment, Oh God, You Devil. The only good thing about this movie is George Burns plays God and the devil. And George Burns is always great, but seriously, seriously bad movie. Now we're going into dramas. Winner of Best Picture that year, Amadeus. Directed by Milos Forman. I love this movie. I absolutely love it. In high school, I was a drummer in the school band, and I was a metalhead. I loved Rush, and I loved metal. And we had a school trip. This was before the movie came out. To go see this movie. with the band, and I went kicking and screaming. Thought I was going to be bored out of my mind, and within 15 minutes of this movie, I was enraptured. I absolutely love Amadeus. It's one of the few Best Picture winners from the 80s that totally deserves it. This is a great movie. Now we're going to go into a different direction, but it'll all make sense in a minute. We're going to start off with Gremlins. Everybody loves Gremlins. I love Gremlins. But again, working at the movie theater, when this movie came out, I lost count of how many traumatized children were coming out bawling in tears between the violence, but most importantly, the Santa Claus scene. Anybody who's seen Gremlins knows what I'm talking about when I mention the Santa Claus scene. Traumatized children were coming out in the lobby every showing, just screaming and crying. And the parents' main complaint was, why is this movie rated PG? And then right around the same time, the second installment of the Raiders of the Lost Ark trilogy came out, and I still call it a trilogy because I'm sorry, that fourth movie is an abomination. We're talking about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This is a great movie, but let's face it, this movie's damn near a horror movie. It is dark as hell. You see children being brutalized. You see people's hearts getting ripped out, and you have one of the grossest dinner scenes of ever. But this movie was a huge hit, but it was hugely controversial at the time. And parents' groups were up in arms about the violence in this movie. They had been talking about making a new movie rating for years, but Gremlins and Temple of Doom in particular finally forced the MPAA to do something that they hadn't done in 30 years. They created a new film rating. That rating, of course, was PG-13. And the very first movie that was released with that rating was Red Dawn. I love this movie. It has not aged all that well. As a matter of fact, when I see people react to this movie online, they're confused because they don't understand why, we're fighting with the Russians. And this movie is great. It is all about Cold War mentality and the Reagan years. And I'll never forget seeing this movie. I had this poster on my wall for years. Seeing this movie theatrically, it seemed plausible at the time. I love Red Dawn. Shout out, as always, to Powers Booth. He nails it, is the Colonel. I love Red Dawn. The next week, the second movie that was rated PG-13 was released was The Woman in Red. But also the same week, this movie, Dreamscape. I absolutely love Dreamscape. That's the original one sheet. This movie has a bunch of genres mixed into one. I've always referred to it as like a fantasy adventure movie, but killer cast, Dennis Quaid, Kate Capshaw, who is actually quite charming in this movie compared to Temple of Doom, and especially Christopher Plummer and Max von Sydow. The two of them are awesome in this movie. Dreamscape, I included in on one of my forgotten film series you need to check out. Please do. It's a great movie. Okay, now we're going to go back kind of into the format that we normally do, but I did want to bring up the PG-13 thing because it was very important in 1984. So now we're going into a couple of war dramas. The first one, Chuck Norris and Missing in Action. People always think of this movie as like a B-movie Rambo. This movie came out a year before Rambo 2. But it came out a year after Uncommon Valor, and it doesn't hold a candle to either of the movies, in my opinion. Actually, the only reason why I have this collection at all is because of the Delta Force, which I do like. Missing in Action, it's considered kind of a classic. I've never really liked it. Next, from another collection I have, Birdie, with Matthew Modine and Nicolas Cage. Look how young those two are there. This is not your traditional war movie. This is all about PTSD. Excuse me. It was directed by Alan Parker. It's a very effective drama. It's a very good movie. It's a weird movie, but it's very good. But I don't know if I would call it a war movie. It's, like I said, it's more of a drama than anything. But it's got a very good early performances from both principal actors, Matthew Modine and Nicolas Cage. It's a movie that you should probably check out. That's Bernie. Okay, now we're going to go into some suspense movies, I guess you'd call them. Bronson's back in The Evil That Men Do. Solid movie. Not one of his best. Not one of his worst. It's solid. It does have a awesome ending, though. So, Evil That Men Do. And the last suspense movie in the list, but certainly, in my opinion, one of the best movies of that year, Body Double, directed by Brian De Palma. This is his take on Rear Window. And anybody who's seen my Brian De Palma ranking video, you know how I feel about this movie. This came in at number 2. I absolutely love Body Double. Now we're going into some sci-fi. And we're back to Star Trek. Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. This is a good movie. I actually really enjoy this movie. There's been an old saying through the years that when the Star Trek movies are concerned, the odd number ones are bad and the even number ones are good. I don't really agree with that. Again, I think Search for Spock is a really good movie. Is it as good as Wrath of Khan? No. But I think it's just as good as Part 4, which everybody loves, with the whales. And that'll be out in a couple of years. But Star Trek 3 was a solid continuation of the Star Trek franchise. And I've always enjoyed it. Next in the sci-fi realm, Night of the Comet. I love this movie. It is so goofy. But I absolutely love it, and always have. As a matter of fact, I just showed this movie to my mother, my sister, and my niece this past weekend. And all 3 of them were a little underwhelmed, but they all enjoyed it. And again, it's one of those movies from my high school years. I love it. Same thing with this one. The Last Starfighter. The main reason why I love this movie so much are the supporting cast. Robert Preston basically does the same role that he did in the Music Man, and Gavin O'Hurley there from Halloween 3 fame and RoboCop fame as the alien. He's awesome. He is absolutely awesome. Last Starfighter, it's not going to win any awards, but I love it. I'll always love it. Next, I almost didn't show this because this is kind of a crappy... I bought this movie off of eBay, and it turned out that it was a library copy missing this bonus feature disc and half the label, and I was kind of pissed off, but I figured I'd throw it in here anyways. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai with Peter Weller and a host of others. This is a very bizarre movie. It took me a long time to get into this movie. It was a huge flop at the time, but it's definitely gotten a cult status since then. And as far as casts go, you're not going to find too many movies with a better cast than Buckaroo Banzai. This is a great science fiction movie, though. And like Psycho 2, it's 1,000 times better than it has any right to be. 2010, the year we make contact. This is the sequel to Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey. This was directed by Peter Hyams, starring Roy Scheider, John Lithgow, and Helen Mirren. I love this movie. I absolutely love this movie. And again, when it was announced that this movie was coming out, people were up in arms. How dare they make a sequel to a Kubrick film, especially that Kubrick film. And the reviews were mixed, and the box office was mixed. But you know what? I really, really, really love this movie. I think it's great. It's a totally different animal. And if anything, it's more accessible than 2001. And then the last science fiction movie on the list, John Carpenter's Starman. Starman's a great movie. It's very underrated. Jeff Bridges was nominated for for Best Picture, or I'm sorry, Best Actor Oscar for this. He did not win. F. Murray Abraham from Amadeus won, rightfully so. But co-starring Karen Allen, this movie is awesome. It's so sweet. It's a love story, but I generally don't like love stories, but this one's really good. I remember sitting there at the back of the theater as an usher, and women would come out at the end of this movie with tears in their eyes and big smiles on their face. Yeah, Starman's great. And then we've got Razorback, or as they would say on the Junk Food Cinema podcast, Razorback. This is directed by Russell Mulcahy, who went on to do the Highlander movies. This is a B movie at best. It's not very good. It's about a giant killer pig, but it's entertaining. We'll leave it at that. Next we have Firestarter, Little Drew Barrymore, based on a Stephen King novel. Good cast. George C. Scott is totally miscast playing an American Indian, but you know what? He pulls it off because he's George C. Scott. He's great. The effects are still good, and this movie's miles ahead better than the remake, but it's still not a great movie. But Drew Barrymore is adorable. Then we've got Friday the 13th for the final chapter. This was the movie that was supposed to end the franchise. And quite frankly, it's my favorite in the entire franchise. Tom Savini came back to do the effects work. They show. This movie has the best cast out of all of the Friday the 13th movies, including a young Crispin Glover, whose dance, his spastic dance, is worth the price of admission alone. This movie was a huge hit because they marketed it as, this is the one where Jason dies, and they were right. And this was supposed to be the final chapter, but this movie was such a big hit, it made more on the opening weekend than in two of the previous franchises combined, that they decided to, of course, come out the following year with a new beginning. We'll get to that next year. But Friday the 13th, final chapter. It's a great slasher. It's my favorite Friday the 13th movie. But we saved this one for last, and technically it's not a horror movie. It's more of a science fiction movie, but The Terminator. What can you say about The Terminator that hasn't already been said? It launched so many careers. First and foremost, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a star at the time. He was becoming a star, but this movie catapulted him into superstardom. And James Cameron. Technically, this is not his movie debut. He did direct Piranha 2: The Spawning, and then he had his name taken off of it. But most people do consider this his movie debut, and what an introduction it is. The Terminator is a classic for so many reasons. I'll never forget seeing it the first time. I thought it was going to be, a low-budget piece of trash. My God, I was wrong. Terminator is quite simply one of the most iconic movies of the 80s, and it's the perfect way to end 1984. I hope you guys enjoyed this. We are going to be speeding these up in case you haven't noticed, mainly because I keep on buying movies from these years that I don't have in my collection, and quite frankly, it's costing me too much money. So we are going to continue to speed these up, but I hope you enjoyed this, and again, we'll see you on the next one.